The Washington Commanders have sort of been stuck in mediocrity the past couple years, where they're never bad enough to go out there and get a top tier quarterback, but they're never able to really compete in the competitive NFC East. Well, last year they were bad enough to go out there and get Jaden Daniels in the first round of this year's draft, and I think they're heading in the right direction. So today, let's talk about the Washington Commanders and why I think this team could be a decent team next year and moving forward. So I want to get one thing out of the way and very crystal clear. I don't think this Commanders team is done building quite yet. Give it 2-3 years and maybe this team could be serious contenders in the NFC. Let's hold off for now. We'll get to that towards the end of the video. Let's talk about why I like this Commanders team. The biggest reason why I like this Commanders team is I think they've done a very solid job of overhauling this roster this past free agency and heading into the 2024 season. You kind of look up and down this roster, there's a ton of new players in a ton of different positions. Austin Eckler, some new receivers, some new offensive linemen, a new tight end, some new defensive linemen like Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler and Johnny Newton, some new linebackers like Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu, a new safety in Jeremy Chin. A lot of overhauling has happened on this roster. And let's be honest, it's exactly what this team needed to do off of what was a horrific 2023 season. Again, they were very bad. They were easily the second worst team in the NFL last year, and they had some games against teams like Dallas and a couple other teams that were just super embarrassing to watch because they were losing by over 20 plus points. But then they fired Ron Rivera, which I thought was the right move to make. I like Ron as a person, I think we all do, but he was kind of a mediocre hire, let's be honest. He wasn't really getting this team anywhere they needed to go. And while I don't love the Dan Quinn hire, if you go back and watch my head coach hiring video, I didn't really love the hire of Dan Quinn, but that's mainly because he became so stagnant in Dallas as the defensive coordinator that they became so predictable as a defense. But I think at the bare minimum, at least as him as the head coach, he's going to be able to let other guys run their schemes while also running his personnel and his schemes as well. So I don't think they'll be as predictable as the Dallas Cowboys once were, but we'll have to wait to see about that one 2 to 3 years down the line. Again, I don't think it's a great hire. I think if they went out there and took a Mike Vrabel or hell, even maybe potentially a Bill Belichick, it would have been a better hire. I don't actually like the idea of Bill Belichick, but I think it would have been better than Dan Quinn. The one thing I will say about Dan Quinn that I do like for this team is that he's somebody who can, at the bare minimum, motivate a roster to perform. That was a big issue with what I saw from Ron Rivera last year is once his team got down maybe 10 points, they weren't coming back. Unless it was against the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know why, they just always woke up against the Eagles. So I think moving forward, you're not going to see this team just get blown out for no reason, just give up and pout. Unlike the Dallas Cowboys against the Green Bay Packers, however. But I think what Dan Quinn has done with this roster has been very interesting. They started off by going out there and targeting some of the guys that he had in Dallas, like Tyler Biadasz, Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong. Then they brought in some high upside players like a Frankie Louvu, who I'm a big fan of. They then paired those guys up with some veterans like a Bobby Wagner, and a Austin Eckler, and a Zach Ertz, and a Jeremy Chin at this point. So I think you have this roster that's sort of able to compete now, but not necessarily a roster that I think is going to blow away any people. But I think at the bare minimum, you have NFL players at every single position, unlike last year. I also think they let a lot of guys go to different teams who really weren't performing up to expectations, such as a Kendall Fuller. So you're hoping to replace those guys with a lot of talented players from this past draft and through free agency, and I think they've done a decent job of doing so. Let's kind of go through each position, starting off with this draft class, because that's kind of what we're all here for. And I thought they had a very solid draft. Sure, there was some questionable picks, mainly the Luke McCaffrey pick in the 3rd round, but I can kind of see where they're going with that pick. Their first pick was Jaden Daniels, and while I had Jaden Daniels as my 3rd ranked quarterback behind Drake May, and I actually like Drake May a lot more than Jaden Daniels, I still like the pick overall. Jaden Daniels is a very unique prospect, of course, because of his athletic ability. He's somebody who can throw a 50-yard bomb down the field in perfect space and perfect accuracy, and it looks like a thing of beauty, while also being able to tuck the ball and run for 50 yards and to get touchdowns through his legs. People are going to compare him to RG3 and Lamar Jackson, but quite honestly, those are kind of unfair comparisons because he's a very unique player and doesn't really play like those guys that much. I think he needs to work on his progressions in the NFL level and being able to throw accurate balls in the middle, especially on underneath and intermediate routes. But I think with NFL coaching, I think all the talent and mechanics are there. I just think it needs to happen in the NFL. Then I think they really killed it in the 2nd round, getting guys like Johnny Newton, Mike Sarenstein, and Ben Sinnott. I'll start off with Ben Sinnott, who was not my 2nd ranked tight end. I actually would have preferred this team to take Jatavion Sanders. But what I will say about Sinnott is that he's a much better run blocker, and I do think he has some upside as a pass catcher as well. Mike Sarenstill was a big-time addition to add to the secondary, which needs a lot of work still. As it sits right now, you're really banking on the fact that Emmanuel Forbes will be able to take that next step next year because of how poor he was in his rookie year. I will say, I think as time went on, he got somewhat better, but I do think that last year he definitely did struggle, but I also at the same time think that under the Dan Quinn system, he could be very successful. Dan Quinn has been able to turn around guys like Trevon Diggs, who had a very rough rookie year, as well as some guys like Deron Bland as well. Emmanuel Forbes, while being a lot skinnier and a lot thinner, if he's able to put on a little bit of weight, does have some similar skill sets to both those guys. He's going to be able to kind of play a more rangy style of defense where he can be a little bit more aggressive in trying to get some picks and interceptions and some big time plays. Keep an eye out on Emmanuel Forbes because I think heading into next year, we're talking about somebody who could easily have 5 to 6 interceptions in his sophomore season. You're looking at somebody in Benjamin St-Juste, who's also a developmental corner from the past couple years, coming from the 2021 NFL draft class in the 3rd round from Minnesota. We're talking about somebody who has gotten better every single year, but still has a lot of work to do as a corner. I don't really have an issue with him being your second starter alongside Emmanuel Forbes in what is probably going to be Mike Sarenstill. Going back to Mike Sarenstill, we're talking about somebody who's probably going to be playing in your slot, but also has some outside cornerback abilities as well. Again, not really a big size corner here, but he will go up there and make some tackles. And I think taking him in the middle of the 2nd round was very good value and a very good addition on this defense. Unfortunately, they did not get their hands on like a guy like a Cooper DeJean or a Kool-Aid McKinstry or Ennis Rakestraw, but I still think Mike Sarenstill is a very fun player to add to this secondary. Then they added Jerzon Newton to add more strength in this defensive line. Yes, you have Deron Payne, and yes, you have Jonathan Allen, but those guys can't be everything on your defensive line. In fact, you're looking at Jerzon Newton as somebody who's more than likely going to be your pass rush player up the middle. Yes, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen can both get to the quarterback, but now you have a 3-tandem interior that he never had in Dallas. And hell, if you really want to put a giant front up in the middle, you could play all 3 of those guys at the same time and just have Dorrance Armstrong play as your one true edge. Imagine a defensive line or a blitz package of Frankie Louvu, Dorrance Armstrong, Jerzon Newton, Deron Payne, and Jonathan Allen. That is a scary defensive front because all those guys have very good pass rush capabilities. So I think the idea of taking Jerzon Newton as a developmental piece is kind of an underside of what he can actually be because I think he's going to be an immediate impact player heading into the 2024 season. Then you look at the rest of the draft. They took Brandon Coleman, who's more than likely going to be playing your left tackle position. I don't love the fact he's going to be starting in his rookie year. I think there were some better players on the board. However, I'm willing to hear it out and definitely see how it will go. Then they took Luke McCaffrey, who's extremely undersized, but will likely be playing in that slot receiver position. He definitely does provide something that a Terry McLaurin and a Jahan Dotson don't provide, so I also do like this pick. Now, was he worth a 3rd round pick? Probably not. I would have taken him in the 4th or 5th round if he was available, but given the fact they didn't have a 4th, it does kind of make some sense. Then they took Jordan McGee and Dominique Hampton, both guys who I think will be primarily playing on special teams, but have some general upside. And they took Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who I'm shocked made it to the 7th round. Yes, he's a little bit undersized, but I think he has a lot of pass rush upside in the NFL. Just give him a couple years. So all in all, if you look at this Washington Commanders team, there's a lot to like about it. I think they fixed a lot of their big-time issues. And when you look at the veterans, I think you're just hoping that they can give you enough on the offense, such as an Austin Eckler. Hopefully he can be your change of pace back to Brian Robinson. I think ideally, Austin Eckler ends up with close to 50 catches for hopefully close to 500 yards. And then, of course, Brian Robinson was going to be primarily handling a lot of the rushing attack, but Austin Eckler can also get that too. When you look at Zach Ertz, you're probably hoping that he can be your mentor to Ben Sinnott, and hopefully Ben Sinnott by the end of the year will be your starting tight end. I think the hope for Zach Ertz is that he can give you enough as a tight end too, so that you could run some two tight end packages on the offensive side of things. I mean, I think from Zach Ertz, you're not really having super high expectations at this point in his career, but if he can get you 300, 400 yards, I think you'll take it. Again, going back to the offensive line, don't love Brandon Coleman being a starter, nor do I like their left guard, but I do think the right side of the offensive line has a lot of potential. Tyler Biotish up the middle, Sam Cosmi at right guard, and Andrew Wiley at right tackle, I think will get the job done for this team. It's definitely far from a finished product, but I think if they can get a couple more pieces heading into the 2025 season, we're looking at a much improved defense and offense. So what is the upside of this Washington Commanders team? Will they win the NFC East next year? Will they be competitive? Will they make the wild card? I don't know quite yet. It depends on how good Jaden Daniels can be in his rookie year. If Daniels can be an offensive rookie of the year like player, we're talking about a team that has a lot of potential to be a very solid roster. So if he is that guy, maybe they could win the NFC East, even though I think Philadelphia kind of has the upper hand right now. I will also say it's going to be a tough schedule, facing Dallas, facing the New York Giants, and the Philadelphia Eagles twice for each team respectively. And even though I think the Commanders are currently better than the Giants and have a good chance to compete with Dallas, we'll have to wait and see because those NFC East matchups are super difficult. But if you're asking me, I don't think they'll make the playoffs next year, but I think they should be pretty close. And I think in 2025, that should be kind of your all-in year to make the playoffs. But Washington Commanders fans and NFL fans, if you disagree, let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button. But I love you guys. Peace.